Hi, everybody. I hope that you guys are all doing well. So, I picked back up writing my written study of the book of Revelation, and we're in chapter 6. And so, I am going to share a little of what I left off the updated version on academia with, and also present some new information and new information that I have written. It's not new because it's in Revelation 6 already. I am simply doing my written study of it. And what this is actually going to take us to is the opening of Seal 1. So, if you guys are familiar with my work, I like to do explanation on the front end so that when we get to these things, hopefully they make sense rather than stopping at every single verse to explain it and set it up. It feels like it'd be going backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. So I like to set up the conversation and provide all of the backstory ahead of time so that when we actually get to the verses, you understand where it's coming from. And in the written study, I have done this repeatedly because I'm writing it in chapter segments and I'm releasing it in chapter segments, understanding that not everyone is going to be following along the whole way. So I have to, with that in mind, repeat myself multiple times where it's necessary to catch a reader up to speed if they have not been following along, instead of assuming that they read it in a previous chapter when they probably didn't. I will say that a good amount of this is set up in the seven letters of the seven churches. As much as they are overlooked, they should not be, because a great amount of the setup work for later imagery or chapter imagery in later chapters of Revelation, even as soon as chapter 4, has already been set up in the seven letters of the seven churches. So it's helpful to understand their backstory and the imagery presented there and the goings on that are being referenced in just a few small words, because those are lengthy to write about. And when you're studying them or when I'm writing about them, it sets up what's going to be important in a future chapter in Revelation. Revelation 6 is kind of no different because we've been introduced to the ancient Jewish wedding ceremony in Revelation 3, specifically in the letter to the church of Philadelphia and letter to the church of the Laodiceans. There was a great amount of imagery set up regarding the ancient Jewish wedding ceremony, so much so that I put the letter to the church in Philadelphia in its own book, because not only is it gospel heavy, but it is very important to read as a standalone. If you read nothing else, the letter to the church in Philadelphia is all about kingdom. What is the kingdom and how do you get to it? That's basically the end goal of everything, is getting into the kingdom. And you do that by believing in the Lord Jesus Christ to be saved. But what did he do? Who was he? That what he did mattered. I mean, there's just a whole bunch of backstory. So the letter to the church in Philadelphia is super important. But the letter to the church of the Laodiceans is ancient Jewish wedding ceremony heavy. A good portion of what is being referenced in that letter specifically relates to the steps of the ancient Jewish wedding ceremony and how none of them were saved. And Jesus was standing at the door knocking. He was the bridegroom was going to the home of his intended bride to offer a marriage covenant, standing at the door knocking. And if they heard him and let him in, he would offer the terms and they would either agree or not agree. And if they did agree, then they would do the things that the disciples did to accept, which was sup, bread and wine, tokens of the new covenant. The marriage is a foreshadow of the marriage supper, which will happen in the kingdom. But there's a whole bunch of eschatology that's set up. So in saying that, the once the bridegroom does return to his bride to marry her, they go into the wedding chamber for 7 days. So that's the period where Revelation 6 picks up, is on that 7 days in the wedding chamber. So what I have done is set up for the understanding that we have been removed. Why? Because we were promised to be spared from it. This period of wrath, condemnation, judgment. And that was established in Revelation 3 and 4 and 5. So when we get to 6, we've well been removed. And so why? Well, because the period of time that we were promised to be spared from, this 7 days in the wedding chamber is about to commence. Revelation 6:1 and 2 ties the beginning of that period of time to a covenant, which goes back to Daniel, because they shall confirm the covenant with how long? 7 days in the wedding chamber, except it's not a week of days, it's a week of years. And so that's where we're at right now. So on the front end of this study, it's important to tie all of these things together, but then you have to relate them. I mean, once you've said, okay, well, 7 days in the wedding chamber, the bride. That comes from John 14. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again, receive you unto me, that where I am, the Father's house, there you may be also. So that's an ancient Jewish wedding ceremony step that the book of John talked about. Okay, well, John also wrote the book of Revelation. So his gospel is ancient Jewish wedding ceremony step heavy. And it would be because he's going to write a book of prophecy that is completely pertinent to that process. So sorry if my computer is blinking. I don't know why it is, but so this is a kind of little bit of setup on the beginning. I'm grateful that you are enjoying my studies. Thank you for reading and or listening to them. So that's why I try to do a lot of this setup on the front end so that I can refer back to it, but also because we need to know like what we're talking about and context before we just start getting into the verses and then just assuming we know when maybe we don't. But the book of Revelation is entirely linear and it builds upon itself. And the majority of the references will come from the Old Testament. Not all, but most. So it's not about the Old Covenant. It's about imagery that was established in the Old Testament and understanding why the Old Covenant couldn't save. Because if it could, then Israel would be good, right? Wouldn't be going into a 70th week. It can't. That's the whole point. So what I'm going to do is go through what I have written about, and this is one of the ways that I like to study. And so obviously, since I'm writing this, it's going to be my own methodologies that will be, how I go about this and how I lined up with the answers that I wind up with. And in this case, we're going to discuss process of elimination because we have this idea, 7 days in the wedding chamber, and we have this idea that there's going to be 7 years of a 70th week. Now, some people say that the 70th week has already been whatever, that it's already happened. It hasn't, and we're going to go through that because that is addressed here. And this is all subject to editing and change. And as I go through it and I read it, I might decide to get rid of some things or to deepen my my writing of some things. So it's helpful for me too to kind of understand as I talk through it what needs more and what needs less and what's just missing altogether. Hi, Thomas. Nice to see you. So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss what it says and then the relationships between two different things. So that's what I'm doing. And like I said, the part that we're going to get to right now in Revelation 6 is a process of elimination. Because we've got this concept of 7 days, 7 years, 7,000 years, just periods of 7 that are kind of like all over the Old Testament and the New Testament as well. So what relates to what, what's pertinent to what, and what can you kind of throw out as relevant? And then what are you left with? And how do you relate it to what you need it to relate to? So I'm going to start near to, this is what I'm starting with now is actually available in the link below on academia. It is in the ongoing document study of the revelation of Jesus Christ. So part of this is available and part of it is not. Where I think the introduction to Daniel's 70 weeks is where I left off. And then I have been writing about that in relationship to our time away from Earth, avoiding things that we weren't meant to be here for. But I'll let you know where I pick up on what is not yet available to the general public. So let's start here. If you're following along in the written study, this is about page 240. And yes, this is an ongoing study. It's very long, but it is comprehensive. And maybe there's some overkill, but whatever. It is what it is. So this is page 240. That's big. Okay, so The hour of temptation. And this comes from Revelation 3:10. Hopefully you guys are familiar with that. The promise is given in Revelation 10, or Revelation 3:10. And you see it later coming to fruition in specifically Revelation 7, but Revelation 4 and 5 also. But it says, because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. The sister passage to that is, for those of you who are not aware, and for those of you who are, is found in 2 Peter 2:9. The Lord knoweth how to deliver the godly out of temptation, and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished. And when you go to the preceding text, there are two examples given. One of Noah, who is the remnant of Israel to be on earth to go through the period of judgment, but they're spared, like Noah and his family were in the ark. They were on earth to go through it, but they were preserved and protected through to come out the other side and to replenish the earth, which is what Israel will do in the kingdom. And then Lot was delivered out of, and judgment did not come until he was completely removed from Sodom. And only once he was completely removed from Sodom did judgment come. That's the church. The Lord knoweth how to deliver the godly out of temptation, and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished. But because the day of judgment, or the hour of temptation, is coming upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth, we have to be removed from the entire earth altogether, which is the bridegroom coming for the bride to take her to the Father's house for the 7 days in the wedding chamber. All these things work together. So, the hour of temptation, condemnation, judgment, wrath, the opening of the seals against those who are not sealed by the Spirit. These are the events we'll not be here for. Ancient Jewish wedding eschatology says 7 days will be spent in the wedding chamber. Adam was in the garden for a literal 7 days before he and Eve were kicked out. And that is actually in another document that I have on academia. If you don't know, that the full text of all of my books are on academia, as well as a bunch of like charts and graphs and things like that. How long were Adam and Eve in the garden is on there, and it is included in this document also, because it's interesting. But Adam and Eve were in the garden for a literal 7 days, which is Adam's time in the wedding chamber. Adam had a marriage covenant with God also, just like Christ has one with the church. Jesus is the second Adam. So what applies to him is going to apply to the first guy too. God and Adam, Jesus and the church. God put Adam in Eden and then gave him the gifts portion of his marriage covenant was Eve. He gave woman to man. And then their 7 days in the wedding chamber, they got kicked out because they sinned. So Adam and Eve were in the garden for a literal 7 days. And the second Adam, Jesus, is going to be in the wedding chamber with his bride for how long? Well, that's what we're going to get to. Process of elimination. Adam was in the garden for a literal 7 days before he and Eve were kicked out. Will the same literal 7 days apply to us? In order to answer that question, we need to identify the specific references to periods of 7 given throughout Scripture and isolate the one which correlates to Revelation's prophecy, and specifically to the timeline of events housed within chapters 6 through 19. This will tell us everything we need to know about our time in the wedding chamber. We'll begin with Genesis 1 through 2. So Genesis 1:31, last verse of the chapter, God saw everything he had made. Behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day, running into the next chapter, Genesis 2:1 through 3. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. So yes, angels were made within the first 6 days of creation, because all the host of them were made within 6 days. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day, sanctified it, because in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. So God created for 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested from his labors. This is the establishment of the week and its corresponding Sabbath, and it provides the structure for the weeks on a calendar as we know them today. In the likeness of his creative week, God gave a law to Israel to work 6 days and rest on the seventh. This is found in Exodus 20, starting in verse 9. 6 days thou shalt labor and do all thy work, but in the seventh day is a Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested in the seventh. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So then, excuse me, God also extended the weeks to the land. However, in that case, it was not a week of days, it was a week of years. This is found in Leviticus 25, starting in verse 1. The Lord spake unto Moses in Mount Sinai, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep the Sabbath unto the Lord. 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow thy field nor prune thy vineyard. Finally, God also extended the weeks to the outline of human history. In that case, it is neither a week of days nor a week of years. It is a week in thousands of years. And this we find in 2 Peter 3. But the heavens and the earth, which are now, by the same word, are kept in store, reserved unto fire unto the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. But, beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some men count slackness, but is long-suffering to usward, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, the elements shall melt with fervent heat, the earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. So approximately 6,000 years will be reserved for man, and the 7th period of 1,000 years will be reserved for Jesus' kingdom on earth, i.e. the millennial kingdom. And it's very important to note that it does not say that one day is 1,000 years and 1,000 years is one day. It says one day is with the Lord as, which means similar to, not exact, but similar to. This is very important because I have charts that include the overview of world history, and there are not 6,000 years, there are 6,034. That would be the life of Christ, the first time. That is missing from the 6,000 years. 4,000 from a point to another point, and then God intervened in the affairs of mankind to bring about an event which ended one thing, started another. And then Jesus left. And from that point to another point, there's 2,000 years. So it's very important for people to realize that 2 Peter 3 does not say that one day is 1,000 years and 1,000 years is one day. That would mean exact. It says is as, which means similar. It is comparing two similar things. They are not the same, they are similar, which is just important because people try to say that from the beginning to now, there's 6,000 years exactly. No, there's not, because it never said that there was. It says is as, which means similar to, not the same. Just want to put that out there. So approximately 6,000 years will be reserved for man, and the 7th period of 1,000 years will be reserved for Jesus' kingdom on earth, i.e. the millennial kingdom. It is within that kingdom we shall have our rest. There are other things that also relate to periods of 7. For example, certain feasts in the law were for 7 days. The Feast of Unleavened Bread and the Feast of Tabernacles. We read about this in Leviticus 23. On the 15th day of the same month, this would be the month Nisan, is the Feast of Unleavened Bread unto the Lord. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. In the first day you shall have an holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein, but you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord 7 days. In the 7th day is an holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein. And then the second one is the Feast of Tabernacles, which is further in the same chapter, Leviticus 23, starting in verse 33. The Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, The 15th day of this 7th month shall be a Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days unto the Lord. On the first day shall be an holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein. 7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. On the 8th day shall be an holy convocation unto you, and you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. It is a solemn assembly. You shall do no servile work therein. Also in the 15th day of the 7th month, when ye have gathered in the fruit of the land, you shall keep a feast unto the Lord 7 days, and then etc., etc. I included more, but for the sake of brevity, I am not going to recite all of that, but it's in Leviticus 23, starting in verse 33. So as I previously mentioned, Adam was in the Garden of Eden for 7 days before he and Eve were removed due to their sin. In his marriage covenant with God, this was Adam's 7 days in the wedding chamber. The story of the first Adam leads into the redemptive story of the second Adam by way of Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles. Why is this important? Because we can begin to eliminate the specific periods of 7 that the Bible references from being pertinent to prophecy by virtue of understanding what has already been fulfilled and is now simply a part of history. In the chart below, and this is where I introduce the chart that is on academia in the link below called How Long Were Adam and Eve in the Garden. I copied and pasted that into this document because we can eliminate the 7, well, it includes the 7 days of creation, the 7 days Adam and Eve were in the wedding chamber, and the Feast of Tabernacles, which is a 7-day feast related to the birth of Christ. So that's why I included it, because it details 3 of the main points that I just talked about relating to periods of 7. So in the chart below, we can identify that the 7 days of creation, Adam's 7 days in the wedding chamber, and the 7 days of the Feast of Tabernacles, along with his 8th day assembly, have already been fulfilled. Our remaining options for which specific periods of 7 relates to the timeline that begins in Revelation 6 are thus: a period of 7 in years, which comes from Leviticus 25, a period of 7 in thousands of years, which is 2 Peter 3, and a period of 7 in days, which relates to the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So those are the options that have not been fulfilled by showing the chart of creations, Adam's 7 days in the wedding chamber, and Jesus' birth, Feast of Tabernacles. Does one of these 3 things left that has not already been accounted for match the ancient Jewish wedding eschatology between Christ and the church? So let's continue with our process of elimination. Since the period of 7 and thousands of years relates to the whole of human history, including the kingdom, it's going to already encompass our 7 days in the wedding chamber between Christ and the church. So it would already include that time period. So we're going to count that out. We can eliminate that as an option. So we're not going to be with our bridegroom in the wedding chamber for 7,000 years. What about the Feast of Unleavened Bread? Well, the Feast of Unleavened Bread was already fulfilled also. 1 Corinthians 5:7. Purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened. For even Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us. Therefore let us keep the feast, not with old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Leaven is related to sin, and Jesus was the unleavened bread, the bread who came from heaven without sin of his own to take on the sin of man and to die for it. That's in John 6 and 2 Corinthians 5, where he talks about being the bread from heaven, and that he hath made him to be sin for us who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. The Feast of Unleavened Bread was fulfilled in the days following the death of Jesus on the cross for the sins of the world. The Feast of First Fruits, which typically occurs during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, was when the sinless Son of God rose in glory to defeat death and offer eternal life to all who believe. Of the 7 feasts named in Leviticus 23 as part of the law, 3 are named in prophecy to be observed in the kingdom, because we're trying to identify what periods of 7 relate specifically to the prophecy, which begins in Revelation 6. There are 3 feasts that are going to be celebrated in the kingdom, 2 of which are 7-day feasts, Unleavened Bread and Tabernacles. However, they do not correlate to the 7 days in the wedding chamber. They will be memorials to Christ's redemptive work, which allowed all who are in the kingdom to be in the kingdom. Since the kingdom comes after our time with our bridegroom in the wedding chamber, they are not going to relate to our 7 days in the wedding chamber. While it is true that the 2 7-day feasts are pertinent to prophecy, they are not pertinent to the specific ancient Jewish wedding ceremony eschatology or to the Revelation 6 timeline. But you can read about them in Ezekiel 45:21 through 25, and in Zechariah 14:16 through 18, where it tells us that in the kingdom, which comes after our 7 days in the wedding chamber, there will be a memorial of Passover and unleavened bread and tabernacle celebrated in the kingdom. After exploring the potentially relevant biblical periods of 7, and using our process of elimination, we're left with only one remaining contender, Leviticus 25's weeks of years. Do we find a relevant biblical prophecy relating to an outstanding period of 7 years that would correlate to our period of 7 in the wedding chamber? Yeah, we do. Daniel 9. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. The people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. In the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. And this here is new. This is not available yet to the general public, so I'm using this as a proofread and just giving you guys more of an introduction to what is to come in the written study of the Revelation of Jesus Christ. Written study of my study of Revelation of Jesus Christ. So Daniel 9 contains a prophecy of 77s. From Nehemiah 2, the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem, to Matthew 21, which is unto the Messiah the Prince, there were 69 periods of 7. That is to say, from Nisan 445 BC to Nisan 1032 AD, 69 periods of 7 weeks of years were completed. The final week of years, also called Daniel's 70th week, was slated for a point in the future, but we'll come back to that in a moment. As we get further into the chapters of Revelation, it will become clear that the outstanding period of 7 is measured in 360-day years. Thus, the same would apply to its predecessors. Drilling down to a day count, we find that 69 periods of 7 years each times 360 days per year equals a total day count from Nehemiah 2 to Matthew 21 of 173,880 days. That is the precise amount of time that elapsed between the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem given in the month Nisan, the 20th year of the reign of Artaxerxes, which is March 14th, 445 BC, and Palm Sunday, Nisan 10, April 6, 32 AD. Thus, although there were only 476 years accounted for between those 2 dates, there were 69 periods of 7 fulfilled because we're talking about a 360-day calendar. On April 6, 32 AD, Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, presenting the kingdom to Israel. They, however, did not accept the king or his kingdom. Thus, Jesus immediately prophesied the delay of the kingdom and stated it would be taken from Israel and given to the nation, bringing forth the fruits thereof. 4 days later, as a Passover lamb, he went to the cross and died in payment for sins under the Old Testament, thereby fulfilling the first 3 of 6 named purposes for the 70 weeks. To finish the transgression. John 19:30, when Jesus therefore received the vinegar, he said, "It is finished." And he bowed his head and gave up the ghost. Old covenant, done. To make an end of sins. Romans 8:2, for the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus hath made me free from the law of sin and death. To make an end of sins is to end the covenant that was of sin and death, which is the old covenant. Romans 10:4, for Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone that believeth, and to make reconciliation for iniquity. 2 Corinthians 5:17, therefore if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. And all things are of God, who hath reconciled us to himself by Jesus Christ, and hath given to us the ministry of reconciliation. To wit, that God was in Christ, reconciling the world unto himself, not imputing their trespasses unto them, and they hath committed unto us the word of reconciliation, which was mentioned like 5 times just now, to make reconciliation for iniquity. Thus, Messiah had been cut off, but not for himself, for everyone else. Following the linear nature of Daniel's prophecy, Daniel 9 next prophesies the events of 70 AD. So it said, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem, Nehemiah 2, unto the Messiah the Prince, Matthew 21, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again in the wall even in troublous times. And after 62 weeks, so after Palm Sunday 32 AD, shall Messiah be cut off. Yeah, 4 days later on Passover, but not for himself. And then later, the people of the prince that shall come. So what's that? 70 AD. Daniel next prophesies the events of 70 AD. Jesus prophesied them as well, letting the people know that the destruction of the city and their sanctuary would come because they did not understand the time of his visitation. Rather than believing unto salvation and going into the kingdom at that time, they rejected him and sent him to the cross. They would not go unpunished for their bad acts. Matthew 27, starting in verse 24. When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but rather a tumult was made, he took water, washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See ye to it. Then answered all the people and said, his blood be on us and on our children. Then he released Barabbas unto them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. This they did because they had been blinded 4 days prior. And we learn about this in Luke 19. The account of the triumphal entry begins in verse 29, but I'm going to start reading in the people. They were saying, blessed be the King that cometh in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest. Some of the Pharisees from the multitude said unto him, Master, rebuke thy disciples. And he answered unto them, saying, I tell you that if these should hold their peace, the stones would immediately cry out. And when he was become near, he beheld the city and wept over it, saying, if thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, the things which belong to the kingdom. But now they are hid from thine eyes. And Luke's account of the crucifixion of Christ is the one who tells us that 4 days later, because they were blinded, they are the ones to whom, or Luke's account says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, because they've been blinded as a recompense for not knowing the time of the king coming to bring the kingdom. They rejected him. So they were blinded. And then they demanded his crucifixion, and Jesus interceded on their behalf. They didn't know what they were doing. Well, saying, if thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes. For the day shall come upon thee, 70 AD being prophesied right here, that thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee, shall compass thee round, and keep thee on every side, and shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee. And they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. Luke 19, 42 through 44 relates to the casting of blindness over Israel and the prophesied destruction of their city and temple in 70 AD. Luke 21, although often thought to relate to Daniel 9:27, 70th week and second coming, actually relates to the events of 70 AD and to Daniel 9:26's prophecy of the first of the desolations that would occur on the heels of Messiah being cut off, but not for himself. The people would come to destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. The people would come to destroy the city and sanctuary, and desolations would be determined. The first desolation occurred in 70 AD and involved the sacking of Jerusalem and the complete destruction of the second temple. The second desolation is amidst the outstanding 70th week and will pertain to the third temple. Therein lies the tie to Revelation 6 and the outstanding period of 7 that correlates to the ancient Jewish wedding eschatology's 7 days in the wedding chamber. Our period of 7 will simply be for a week of years and not a week of days. Daniel 9:27. He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. In the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate. Second desolation. Even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. I mean, this is all well and good, but how do we know that Daniel 9's 70 weeks prophecy, and specifically his outstanding week of years, relates to Leviticus 25's weeks of years? Well, because Daniel tells us that they do. Daniel 9:25 says, "Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks." This is a critical piece of information here. It is often questioned that if these 69 weeks of years are actually consecutive and there's no break in between, why would Daniel not just say 69 weeks or periods of 7? Why did he separate 7 and 62? Because Leviticus 25's weeks of years have a very precise starting point, which all of Daniel's weeks of years adhere to, Nisan 10. This is why the going forth of the command to restore and to build Jerusalem was given in the month Nisan in Nehemiah 2, and why unto the Messiah the Prince was Palm Sunday, Nisan 10. All the weeks of years begin and end on Nisan 10. Why so? Because it's a one-time command given to start a count when something specific happens. Leviticus 25:1, the Lord spake unto Moses in Mount Sinai, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. Leviticus 25:8 says, Thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of years unto thee, 7 times 7 years, and the space of 7 Sabbaths of years shall be unto thee 49 years. And ye shall hallow the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you. Ye shall return every man unto his possession. Ye shall return every man unto his family. When did Israel enter the land to begin the count of weeks of years that would lead to the establishment of the jubilee? Joshua 4, starting in verse 15. The Lord spake unto Joshua, saying, Command the priests that bear the ark of the testimony that they come up out of the Jordan. Joshua therefore commanded the priests, saying, Come ye up out of Jordan. It came to pass when the priests that bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord were come up out of the midst of the Jordan, that the soles of the priests' feet were lifted up on a dry land, that the waters of the Jordan returned into their place and flowed over all his banks as they did before. And the people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and encamped in Gilgal on the east border of Jericho, and those 12 stones which they took out of Jordan did Joshua pitch in Gilgal. Adhering to the legal command to number 7 Sabbaths of years, Daniel called out 7 weeks and 62 weeks. He was telling us that his prophecy uses Leviticus 25's weeks of years, whereby the start of all pertinent weeks have a Nisan 10 date. Yes, that includes the outstanding 70th week of years. It is even more important to note the outstanding week of years does not only the outstanding week of years not only has a Nisan 10 start date, but it will also pertain to a Jubilee year. This we will discover in short order. It is now time to tie Daniel 9:27 to Revelation 6. How can we be certain that our 7 days in the wedding chamber relates to the outstanding week of years from Daniel? More specifically, what events can we use to determine the precise starting point of this period of condemnation, wrath, judgment that we were promised to be spared from? The answers to our questions lie with the opening of Seal 1. And this is Revelation 6, 1 and 2. So that is where I actually get into the start of Revelation 6 by virtue of the opening of Seal 1. And for those of you who want to know specifically how we pinpoint the start of the 70th week, this outstanding period of 7, this 7 days in the wedding chamber, to Revelation 6, 1 and 2, the opening of Seal 1, it comes with imagery of the bow. The bow is used to denote a covenant being in place. It ties back to language that was introduced to us in Genesis 9:13, specifically when Noah and his family came off of the ark and they did their sacrifice to God, and God was covenanting with Noah and his family unconditionally and said, I do put my bow in the cloud as a token of a covenant, that when man or beast or God looked upon it, they would be reminded of God's unconditional promise to never destroy the world with water again. Bow is the Hebrew word kesheth, which translates via interlinear study to the Greek word taxon in the New Testament. Only appears one place, which is Revelation 6:2. The rider on the white horse has a bow, because that is indicative of a covenant being in place. What covenant is pertinent to this period of 7, where we will be gone from the earth, and this period of judgment. Daniel 9:27, he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. So Revelation 6:2, by virtue of the bow imagery, ties you to the beginning of a period of 7, and specifically to Daniel 9:27 as the start of the 70th week, which is why from that point to the time when Jesus actually comes back is 7 years, and it is our 7 days in the wedding chamber. And yeah, that's a Nisan 10, because weeks of years have the same start date, Nisan 10. So that's what we're going to talk about, get into next, is how we can precisely pinpoint the start of the 70th week. Revelation 6:2, the bow, the covenant, meaning a covenant is in place. And what is the specific benchmark of the covenant? Well, Daniel 9 says, he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And this is where I'm going to bring in the Septuagint, because it is entirely pertinent to this. In Daniel 9:27, what does it mean to confirm the covenant with many for 1 week? Daniel 9 tells us, I was in the book of Amos. I just have to find it. It has all the minor prophets together. Some major and minor prophets. Is this? Oh, sorry. I was in the wrong spot. All right, sorry. He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. How do we specifically tie, like what event can we tie to that as the undeniable starting point of the 70th week? Like, what does it mean to confirm the covenant? The Septuagint says, the covenant will prevail for many, and it will return again and be rebuilt broad and long. In Daniel 9:27 in the KJV, it says, he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. In the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate. What is it? Well, in the Septuagint, it says, it shall return and be rebuilt broad and long. It's the temple. So the pinpoint to the beginning of the 70th week is the measurement for the temple that will have a sacrificial system resumed, and that will eventually be made desolate in the midpoint of the week, which is what Revelation 11 talks about. So the beginning of the covenant, the confirmation of the covenant, is pinpointed to the measurement for the temple that will exist in the 70th week. And the only outstanding temple to be built in the Old Testament is Ezekiel's. Ezekiel gives you a day, month, and year pinpoint precisely to when his temple will be measured for. Nisan 10 in a Jubilee year. So that's what I'm going to get into next. And I'm not going to spend too much time talking about like specific dates in here, because I don't want to detract from the message at hand. I've already written 2 books where I've talked about that at great length, the Jubilee and Ezekiel's Temple and Daniel's 70 weeks, both of which are available for free in the link below on academia. So if you want more information about all of that and how I make those conclusions, there are 2 great references available. However, that is how we can pinpoint everything we need to pinpoint to a starting point, to a covenant, and to the measuring for a temple, the specific day, month, and year that the Old Testament prophets give for that, Revelation 6:2. So yes, we know day, month, and year of when the 70th week will commence by virtue of what it's tied to, which is the measuring for a temple, the prophecy of which is given day, month, and year for the same day, month, and year in the future. But yeah, this is all already written about. This is not new information from me specifically, but the references are already available. So I would specifically check out the Jubilee and Ezekiel's Temple. Again, that is a free full text PDF of the book available in the link below on academia.edu. And also, if you just want to know more about the 70 weeks prophecy, I go through the whole chapter of Daniel 9, not just the prophecy itself, but all of Daniel 9. And it's called Daniel 70 Weeks. And the full text PDF of that is available in the link below also. So that's where we're at with this. And so when I pick up writing, which I'm going to do here shortly, I just wanted to go through this verbally to proofread, because I do that. and also to share with you guys what is upcoming. And I'm going to get into Revelation 6:1 and 2 and all of the components that are mentioned there and what they mean. So it'll be a mini Jubilee and Ezekiel's temple. Carol, hi. Seals and trumpets in first half. How's Revelation 7:14 the Great Tribulation? It's not the Great Tribulation. It is not a flash forward to the text. I would encourage you to watch a video that I put out recently. Let me find it. That I spent a whole bunch of time talking about this. I think it's one of the most recent videos. I made it on May 31st. It's called Revelation 6-8. When precisely are the 144,000 sealed? That should answer your question. But I have actually talked about that quite a bit. And I'm just going to direct you to a previous video. And also probably, it's already actually written about, Letter to the Church of Pergamos. Letter to the Church of Pergamos. Read the letter to the Church of Pergamos, and you probably won't have any more questions about that. Like I said, all of the text from the later chapters of Revelation are set up in the previous chapters, probably in the 7 letters of the 7 churches. The context for Great Tribulation in being cast into versus come out of, those are opposites. Who gets cast into? Unbelievers. Who gets come out of or kept out of? Believers. And so that's a contrast. The Revelation 2, letter to the Church of Pergamos, and the Revelation 7, great multitude that no man can number, are contrasts of each other. So I would check that out. Jesus is God. Yes. I pray only to Jesus. Yes. There is no other God beside him. Yes. I read only the King James Bible. No. Never put all your eggs in one basket. And the Septuagint is proof positive that putting your eggs in one basket is not fortuitous when you're talking about specifics of Daniel 9:27. I would never advocate not cross-referencing. That is a ridiculous statement. I know some people are diehard KJV, but whatever, it's a translation. Yeah, we're going to put you on timeout, Wesley. Please do not spam. Anyway, if you guys have any questions, comments, or feedback, please let me know. I am going to get writing more. But Carol, yes, check out Letter to the Church of Pergamos. If you have more questions, check out that video that I just referenced. Otherwise, I will be writing about it in very short order. And there is also a reference material in the link below on academia that asks who are the multitude. And it has scripture correlating that we can identify them with. I kind of set that up in preview of what I will need to reference going forward. But I have a lot of stuff actually relating to the multitude that no man can number. So check some of that out. And if not, I'll be writing about it in the next chapter that I write about. Thomas, could Gog-Magog war happen before the rapture? It won't. It might start before. At the worst case, last case scenario, the rapture will happen during. I do believe that we will be here to see the beginning of that. We will not be here to see the conclusion of that. Because that is when God moves from being behind the scenes to an overt, here I am in your face, and the confirmation of the covenant will follow directly on the heels of that. As a result from, hey, don't kill us, we'll give you whatever you want, here, take your temple. Just spare us. Because like God just decimated a cloud, an army that came as a cloud to cover the land. In unique fashion on the world stage in front of everyone for the express purpose of the heathen knowing he exists, which is stated 5 times in Ezekiel 38 and 39. So the world's going to be shoving Israel's temple at them. Here, take this. Just keep your God off of our backs. The purpose of Gog and Magog is to unify Israel to a common purpose for the purpose of doing something as one, confirming the covenant, being judged as one for confirming the covenant, which is absent Jesus, and then all of that. So yeah, Gog and Magog is the unifying event to bring Israel to one, to do something as one, to be judged as one, and eventually to be saved as one. Israel is not presently one, but that will be the change. That'll be the flip of the script, the divine intervention that sets Israel on a course to eventually redemption. That is the purpose of Gog and Magog. So it will come immediately before the 70th week. If we are here to see the beginning of it, we will not be here to see the conclusion of it, and certainly not the confirmation of the covenant that will happen directly on the heels of it. So I do think that we'll be here to see the beginning of it, but I could very well be wrong because I don't know like what the lead up to that is, or like how quickly it will happen, how quickly they'll assemble, how quickly they'll come against the land. But my guess is that it's going to take a second to assemble, and we'll see they're traveling from the north to Israel. We won't be here to see them destroyed on the mountains of Israel, because that's God moving from behind the scenes to here I am, time to judge you. So good question. But if we are here to see anything as a sign that it's time to go, it would be Gog and Magog, and that would be like directly before a Nisan 10 of the year that we are ready. This time to go. So that would be our identifier, is Gog and Magog. Ezekiel 38 and 39, because Ezekiel 40 is the measurement for the third temple. So, I mean, in the sequence of linear events that Ezekiel lays out, it's Ezekiel 38 and 39, Gog, Magog, and the next chapter is the measuring for his temple. So that tells you, like, cause and effect right there. And we are given a precise pinpoint to the measurement of his temple to Nisan 10 of a Jubilee year, which correlates to Daniel 9:27, Daniel's prophecy of 70s. He was in the 70 years of Babylonian captivity, receiving a vision about the 70 weeks, the 70th week of which will begin on the 70th Jubilee, with the measurement for Ezekiel's temple that was Ezekiel was given a vision of on the 10th day of the first month in a Jubilee year, to tell us what will happen on the 10th day of the first month in a Jubilee year in the future, which happens to be the 70th Jubilee. So these are all very closely tied together. Again, the Jubilee in Ezekiel's temple. I believe I talk about Gog and Magog and what purpose that serves in that book also. So not to get too far off track, but I'm going to continue writing regarding the opening of Seal 1. And if you guys do have any other questions, comments, or feedback, just leave them in chat for me. I will answer them. And otherwise, I will bid you guys a wonderful weekend and have a good day. See you later.